Hello everybody and welcome to Long Range Science. So today what I want to do is take a look at my competition rifle and see what all goes into building a purpose-built, dedicated long range or precision rifle. So now first off, I have built everything on my rifle around a Christensen Arms MPR competition. So a few of the variations in the competition versus the standard Christensen Arms MPR is going to be most noticeably, this one comes with a steel barrel rather than carbon. So now the profile and contour is exactly the same, but it is made of steel instead of being turned down and carbon wrapped. So now the purpose for that is purely going to be for added weight. So when you're looking at doing a long range precision build, what you want is to be able to minimize your recoil, to be able to stay on target, to watch and spot your shots, and be able to make corrections. So in those instances, weight is actually going to be your friend. So when you're building a rifle system like this, the most weight you can reasonably and practically add for that situation is what you want to go with. So where this is a PRS rifle, I do still have to pick it up, move it around, and set it up on barricades. So right now I'm sitting right around 19 pounds, which for a PRS rifle is actually towards the lighter end. But that steel barrel does give me that little bit extra weight. So now next, I've got this rifle built in a 6mm Creedmoor cartridge. So the 6mm Creedmoor is just a neck down 6.5 that you're probably all familiar with. The downrange ballistics are fantastic. It's on par and actually has a little bit less drop than the 6.5 out to 1,000 yards. The wind is basically the same, but I'm shooting 105 grain bullets out of this right now versus the 140 to 147s you run with a 6.5. So now the other benefit you get by doing that is you get still the high ballistic performance of the 6mm bullets. There's fantastic ballistics on those. The other benefit you're going to get is minimized recoil. So the 6mm caliber is running a little bit faster than the 6.5 Creedmoor, and some 6mm variations run even a little bit slower. You get a little bit less recoil and more manageable recoil out of those 6mm cartridges than you do with heavier bullets. So now, as I mentioned before, spotting your shots, making corrections, all those things are going to be very important because no one is going to hit 100% first round every time. So being able to come back, spot your shots, see where you hit, and make corrections is going to be very important to the long range game. And where this rifle is kind of set up to be a 1,000-yard max range gun, the 6mm is perfect for that. When you start getting beyond 1,000 yards and start building a more long range gun, especially into the ELR range, you do want to go with a bigger caliber, bigger cartridge that can push heavier bullets faster to maintain that energy. But for what I'm doing, going to 1,000 yards, this handles it perfectly. The energy retention and everything is just what I need to shoot steel up to 1,000 yards, even up to 1,200 in some instances. So now with that being the basics, the other upgrade that the MPR competition does have over the standard MPR is that it comes with an upgraded Trigger Tech special trigger as opposed to the field. So now the special trigger is weighted at about 1.5 pounds to 2.5 pounds, somewhere in that range. I actually did take that out and trade it with the Trigger Tech Diamond. So now these are ranging from 4 ounces to 2 pounds. So personally for me, I run my trigger just over 1 pound. This one's about 1.25 pounds for a trigger pull weight. I did try to go a little bit lighter than that, but what I noticed is that when I would cycle the bolt and come down to find the trigger, I would sometimes bump the trigger. It was too light, and I'd actually I could potentially have discharges when I wasn't ready for them. So I did bump my trigger weight up a little bit so that I can find my trigger, get on it, and make a nice clean pull. But that little bit over 1 pound is still plenty that it's causing me to not jerk and pull off to the side and cause me some error shots. Very crisp, very clean, nice trigger pull, nice break, no creep. Very light and clean. So definitely a fantastic upgrade. I've loved that trigger and I've loved running it. So now let's come here and start in the back. So now as you can see, what I've got on here is what's known as an adjustable bag rider made by Longshot Precision. So now what this does is it's made to be a bag rider, but as the name suggests, it is adjustable. So for almost all of my instances, when I'm not shooting off of a barricade or doing positional shooting, I'm shooting either from a bench or preferred prone. So with that, I'm using a front bipod and a rear bag for almost all of my support. So with using the adjustable bag rider, I can come, set it on my rear sandbag, get a nice stable platform, and then usually what you have to do is kind of squeeze the bag to adjust the fill to be able to adjust the position of your rifle and where you're aiming. So now with this, you can get it settled really nice in the bag, you can use this thumb screw on here, and it will actually make the adjustments, and it will tip your rifle up and down, allowing you to make very fine corrections without having to squeeze your bag and use muscle pressure to keep that rifle into position. So now the other main benefit of that is after the shot. So when you can actually seat and set your bag fill and keep it in one position, upon recoil, your gun is going to want to move. It's going to want to shift the material and things in your bag. If you have the fill settled and you can use this bag rider to maintain and adjust your positions rather than having to squeeze your bag fill, you're going to be able to get a lot more consistency and maintain a good sight picture and good recoil control, because your bag fill is not going to be moving as much under recoil because you're doing your adjustments in the bag rider. Now coming forward, I do have a enhanced vertical grip on here. This grip in particular does have a nice wide palm swell as well as a thumb shelf here on the side, and actually a little pad here for the trigger finger as well. So now what this allows you to do is come around and get a good shooting position. It makes your hand come to the same place every time to maintain that consistency. We'll get the bolt out of the way a little bit here. So you get a thumb rest right here to keep your thumb on the bolt side of the rifle, trigger pad on your trigger finger to make sure it gets a nice clean position every time. So now one thing you might not be used to, it might be kind of new to you, is that shooting grip style that I just showed you. But so now if you'll watch, a lot of precision long range shooters go with a one side of the rifle hold. Rather than coming around and gripping all the way around the gun and the grip, they keep the hand on one side. So now for me personally, there's a few reasons I do that. One is going to be the ability to run the bolt quickly. So if you're on the strong side and the bolt side, you can fire, come up, and rack around and get right back on the grip immediately. If you're around the side, you go to shoot, you got to come all the way around, come up, find and engage the bolt, and run it. So that's one of the biggest benefits for me. But now really one of the biggest reasons as far as precision and accuracy is it is going to let you have a lot better grip control on your rifle. When you're coming all the way around the rifle and you're engaging that rifle with your wrist, you have a lot of chance when you're pulling the trigger to twist, cant, pull, and just rotate that gun in a whole bunch of different directions based on your firing hand. With you just kind of coming and grabbing straight back, you get an inline grip. You're not twisting or rolling or rocking at all. You get that straight inline clean trigger pull without having to torque or twist your wrist. Makes your shots much more clean, much more precise from what I have found. Now let's come up and look at the optic I've got in here. So now when I'm talking about a precision rifle, it's actually going to be a precision rifle system. The rifle itself is just actually going to be one component of that entire precision system that we have to look at. So the optic I've got on top is the Apex Optics Rival, and it is a 4-32 power by 56 meaning the millimeter of the objective lens. And it has been a fantastic scope for me. I just got this not too long ago, but I've been very impressed. So the 56mm objective lets it gather a ton of light. It's very crisp, very clear. The magnification range from 4 to 32 power is fantastic for about any situation or scenario that you could be using it in. So now this one in particular is in mils, and I've got another video talking about the scope that you guys can go check out if you want to. Fantastic scope. There's too much to go over with the scope in just this video, so we can go look at it in depth in some of those other videos. I'll be doing some more videos on this one here in the future just because there's so much to go over on it. But the reticle is fantastic. The clicks are nice and crisp, has a solid zero stop. Everything about the scope has been fantastic. But let's just kind of talk about some of the basics. When you want to pick a long range or precision rifle scope, there are a few things you really do want to look for. So one is going to be your needed magnification range. So in competitions and things like that where I'm moving a lot and engaging targets, usually up to about 700 yards is kind of where they're at, I run on about 15 to 18 power, somewhere in there. So what that does is that gives me enough of a zoom to get my target, make sure I've got a good hold in my reticle, make sure I'm holding where I want to be and spot my shots, but it's not too much that I'm always struggling finding my targets. So now one thing I have noticed is a lot of people do like to run their scopes on the max magnification. They get on a position, they have a hard time finding the target, and they waste most of their time trying to find that. And then once they do, they shoot, they jump off a target from a recoil and have to come back on, and it takes them forever to find it again. So magnification is a personal preference. It's going to depend on what your shooting level is, your recoil management, and a few things. But up to about 700 or so yards, I don't usually go anything over 18 power. So now sometimes when I'm shooting and sighting my rifle in, I do like as much magnification as possible to make sure I'm getting as consistent of hold as I can. So in those cases, I will run it up to the max range of 30 to 32. Or if I'm set down behind a bench or a tripod and a bipod, I'm getting a nice precision, slow shots at 1,000 yards or so, trying to get absolute precision, I will bump the magnification up to those ranges just to make sure my holds are absolutely consistent as possible. Okay, so now let's look at the rings. So the rings I've got on here are a collaboration between Christensen Arms and Warren Scope Mounts. Now these rings have a few unique features. They have a built-in bubble level and also a built-in data card. So now if you guys can see this data card hanging off the side here, what that allows me to do is when I am setting up and going for a stage, I can actually go through and find my targets, get the ranges, plan my stage out in advance, write my holds on the whiteboard, and keep that to the side so it's always attached to my gun. So when I dial for one target, I shoot, I move positions, I go to the next, I can check the card again, make those secondary corrections, and come back all without having to memorize all of my holds. So I can do elevation, I can do wind holds on there. It keeps them in a very nice, handy position right off the side of my gun. So now, as I mentioned, it also has a bubble level that can come off the side too. Cant and the rifle is going to be something that's very important when trying to shoot precision in long range. A cant or a tip or angle in your rifle will affect where your bullet impacts downrange. Because your scope is in line with your bore, those two need to be perfectly lined up, because if you tip, your scope's not going to be in line with your bore and you're going to be coming off at a little bit of an angle. So always want to make sure your shots are clean, precise, and your rifle is level to make sure you get the absolute most consistency. Now, one other feature I did add on here is going to be an Anarchy Outdoors. This is the Big Bertha bolt knob. So now my personal preference, I like a big, beefy bolt knob. I like something I'm not going to miss and I'm not going to fumble for after I shoot when I'm trying to run quick and get back on target and into position. So I particularly like this one because it does have more of an hourglass shape. So when I am running my bolt, the way I do this is after I fire, I kind of come and put my thumb on the back of the gun. I use my finger to engage the bolt and lift up with the finger, slide it back, and then throw it back forward. So that hourglass shape gives me a nice place to get my thumb set into, to pull the rifle back, and to cycle it cleanly and quickly. Okay, now let's come forward a little bit more. So now let's kind of come and look at the bipod that I have in this rifle. So now the one that I'm using is the AccuTac WB Force. Now the WB stands for wide base. As you can see, the arms on this bipod are flared out from the pivot point, meaning that the center of gravity from the rifle sits lower on the bipod than it would in some other situations and with some other bipods. That gives me a very nice stable position because the legs are here, the weight wants to push down. It's just an inherently more stable platform for when I'm trying to engage long range targets with my bipod. So now there's a whole host of bipods, a whole host of situations you can use them in, different heights, different attachments, different things like that. This one's worked very well for me. I may get one that's a slightly taller here in the near future, but I've been absolutely in love with the AccuTac, the durability and the stability of it. Because when you're looking at a bipod, you do want to avoid cheap bipods purely because of the way they are machined and manufactured. You need a bipod that's going to hold up to recoil, that you're going to be able to load into to make sure that those legs are tensioned and not have that bipod move or pivot or shift. You need that bipod to be as stable as possible. So now with that, let's look at how the bipod is attached. So I am running ARCA rails for a lot of my attachments on there. So now ARCA is just a method of attaching similar to pick rails or things like that, that allows you to quickly attach and detach platforms and different accessories to your rifle, tension them on, and then if you don't need them, you can quickly just loosen them and get rid of them. So the MPR Competition does come with a handguard that has a ton of M-LOK slots. So now M-LOK is just the mounting accessory. It was developed by Magpul. There's a whole host of accessories that can mount to M-LOK attachments, and that's what these slots here on the bottom, or on the side and on the bottom are. So now what I've done is I've just taken some ARCA rails, I have bolted them to the M-LOK slots, and now that is how I can go ahead and mount all my gear here on my rifle. And because unlike a pick rail where it's got notches, this allows me to position it forward and backwards on that ARCA rail slide it off really quickly, reposition it depending on the situation and where I need it to be. Okay, now let's work our way up to the front of the gun. So what I have here is the Eric Cortina tuner muzzle brake, and this is actually the next gen edition that we'll look at in a separate video. So a muzzle brake or muzzle device is going to be very important when you want to get a good sight picture, good recoil control when you're trying to engage targets at distance or from less than stable positions and manage your recoil appropriately. So the whole point of a muzzle brake is to divert and redirect the gases that are expanded and propelled out the barrel during the firing sequence, because that's going to be a part of the overall recoil of the system, is the mass of the bullet going out of the barrel and the mass of the gases. So what we can do is by diverting those and diverting the thrust and momentum of those gases, we can actually minimize the recoil to the rifle, because rather than all the force going out forward and pushing back on the rifle, we now have the forces pushing out the side, which is just going to help us minimize those. So now muzzle brake or suppressor, whatever you've got or whatever's available. I prefer suppressors in some instances, just because not only do you get the recoil reduction, but you also get the sound mitigation factor. But they are kind of long and cumbersome and heavy, so for some situations they aren't always appropriate. So I usually do just run a muzzle brake. So now this muzzle brake has done a fantastic job of keeping the recoil down, keeping me on target. Very good at minimizing the recoil signatures. Now, as I mentioned, this is a tuner brake, so it actually does have a knob up on here that adjusts the harmonics of the barrel that allows us to do a little bit of tuning. So that's a topic for a different video, but that is just kind of what that is, and that's something that we can go into here in the future. Now, one other thing you can probably see that I've got mounted to my handguard up here in the front is going to be some weights. So as I mentioned, weight is your friend when it comes to these types of rifles, because you're trying to minimize recoil to stay on target and watch your shots. So along with just helping you mitigate recoil through adding mass to your rifle, it also helps you adjust and tune the balance point of your rifle. So now when I'm shooting in PRS stages, a lot of the times you're set up on a barricade or some different shooting positions, and in those instances what you almost always going to do is get a good shooting bag as your rest. But a lot of the times you only get one contact point for your rifle to sit on. So in those cases, what I like to do is I like to have my rifle as balanced as possible on that bag when I'm shooting. So because of the way the rifle's center of mass works, is it's usually back here more in the center of the receiver. So along with adding the heavy steel barrel and a little bit of weights, what I can do is shift the center of gravity of my rifle a little bit forward of the mag well, and that means that I can balance that rifle forward of the mag well, so I can come up, put the rifle in position, get on target and shoot, because if the center of mass was a little bit further back, it would be in the way of my magazine and I wouldn't be able to balance my rifle. So that rifle balancing on the shooting position is going to be very important to you getting a nice stable shot. If that rifle isn't centered, it's going to be wanting to tip forward or backwards depending on the way it's set up, and then you as a shooter are going to be having to fight that rifle wanting to move. So you're going to have to be fighting the rifle to keep it into position. So if it's balanced on the center of mass on the bag, that is just one less thing for you to have to control to get a clean shot off. All right, now last but not least, one of the things I did add onto here is going to be the Tacticam FTS system with the 5.0 camera is what I'm running on here. So now this is how I'm able to record through my scope to get you guys all the footage of the reticle and the target when I'm actually shooting. So what it is it's just a system that mounts onto the back of the scope. They've got a few different adapters. They can hook on different scopes to get centered. The camera mounts to them. You can still look through the scope and use it while you're shooting. It doesn't get in the way. It doesn't interfere with your sight picture. The clarity's actually still been fantastic, but I can record while I'm shooting, go back and watch them, and use that as a training so I can go back and see what I did, review the tapes, and see what I need to improve on next time. Because a lot of the times you go back and you try to think of the shots you missed, you replay them in your head and you can't remember exactly what happened. This has been able to let me go back, see what really happened, whether I pulled them, whether the wind picked up and I didn't catch it. Just a lot of small things that it's helped me improve on and tune up my shooting abilities with. All right, well that's basically the basics of what I have got into my precision rifles. Now there's a whole bunch of different setups, different variations of stocks and chassis. You can see I've got a chassis on this system. It can hinge and fold, makes it very nice for transportation, easy to pack in a bag and things like that. A lot of people like a more traditional stock, but a few of the key things you will find on any rifle that's set up for long range or precision is going to be either a heavier or full contour barrel, because not only is the extra weight a benefit, but the more material helps you control harmonics, so that barrel's not wanting to whip as much on the shot. It's going to hold it much steadier, tend to be much more accurate in most instances. Weight is going to be the other distinguishing factor from your competition and your hunting style rifles. So those are going to be the big ones. Any rifle, any centerfire rifle is going to be able to shoot to 1,000 yards. A 223 can shoot 1,000 yards without too much problem. The difference that comes in is what that rifle is purpose built for. Like I said, there's a few things on here that make this ideally set up to run those long range shots and be more set up to make those as opposed to my hunting rifle, which is a little bit more basic, made for engagements of 400 yards or less. A few of the differences in the way they're set up and the way they're built. But really, when it comes down to it, the most important aspect of any rifle is just getting out, shooting it, knowing what the rifle's capable of, getting comfortable behind it, learning what your elevation holds are, what your wind holds are for different situations, get practice time on that rifle, get out and shoot, and then just get an understanding and a feel for what that rifle is going to do in different environments. And that's going to be the biggest thing that will get you on target to 1,000 yards or beyond.